Good evening, all. Welcome to the Astro Imaging channel on this lovely September night. Tonight we have Tim Hutchison, our very own, who'll be talking about some equipment to enhance your image processing that is not your typical astronomy equipment. So get to learn about some new devices tonight. I'm not going to share my screen to show upcoming talks. I can just tell you, or you can just go to the website, theastroimagingchannel.com or .org, and see what upcoming talks we have. But next week we have Steve Ziegler talking about the solar eclipse. I bet you've been wondering if we're going to talk about solar eclipse photography on here with the upcoming total eclipse in April. Yes, we are. Next week with Steve Ziegler. And then the following week, October 1st, we have Alistair Simon back with us, talk about doing ultra wide field mosaics with the Samyang 135. And then following October 8th, we have Linda Thomas Fowler, who's on a regular watcher of the show. We'll come on to talk about this weather station that she's been building. And I'm very curious to hear about that because I want to build one for myself as well. And then we're off on October 15th for the annular eclipse. So if you are going to be out of town that weekend and you're afraid you're going to miss the show, don't worry, we're not having a show that week so that we can all go see the annular eclipse. So yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot more needs to be said. So Tim, take it away.
Okay. Let me bring up my presentation here. And we have that.
Looks good.
Okay.
Hit that hide button there.
So hi, everybody. It's been a while since I gave a presentation here on the Astro Imaging channel, so I'm excited to be back. For any of you that don't know me, my name is Tim Hutchison. I'm a retired CEO of a software company. I've been a photography enthusiast for a long time. I got into astrophotography around 2018, and I currently operate primarily three telescopes. I have my TAIC 200, a large refractor out at the SRO. I have a TOA 130 in the backyard observatory, and I have a custom solar scope as well. Tonight, as Molly kind of alluded to, we're going to be talking about hardware, but we're going to be talking about some different hardware, not the kind of stuff that we usually talk about around here. We usually talk about telescopes and mounts and cameras and filters. And tonight we're going to talk about something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about some of the other equipment that I use, primarily in post-processing, that I believe has had a positive impact on my astrophotography journey, and you know, on the images that I produce. And so we're going to talk a little bit about pen displays and tablets and what they are and how they work and how I think it adds to the workflow and adds to the process. We're going to talk about other user interface devices, control surfaces. We'll see that. We're going to talk about colorimeters, and we're going to talk a little bit about printers. So I want you to know that all of the stuff that I'm going to show you tonight is my equipment that I purchased, that I own, and that I use every day. I'm not affiliated with any of these companies. I didn't receive any incentives or any equipment from any of these companies. This is just my stuff. And if I start sounding like a commercial, it's just because I'm passionate about it and I really like the things that I'm using. So with that, let's get started. And as I said, the first thing we're going to talk about are pen displays and pen tablets. And for those of you that haven't used a pen display and don't know what it is, a pen display is just a monitor, like any other, but you interact with that monitor with a pen, and you actually physically write on the monitor. And so we're going to see that here in a second. The ones that I use are from a company called Wacom, W-A-C-O-M. You see their website there on the slide. They have an array of tablets that range from 16 up to 27 inches. It's a very, very high quality display device. These are made for creative types, for photographers, for videographers, for illustrators. So it's a very high quality display. Excuse me, it's not overly saturated. It's not overly bright like the commercial displays that we often get with our computers. So it's really lends itself well to the kind of work that we do. And so we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about another offering from Wacom, their pen tablets. Pen tablets give you a lot of the same benefits as a pen display, but it's a much cheaper device. The displays are a couple grand, the tablets are a couple hundred. So So it's a much cheaper device. Again, Wacom has an array of them, and I'll show you one of the ones that I have here. So let's do that. I'm going to be moving around, and there's going to be lots of moving parts here tonight. So I apologize in advance for anybody that gets seasick. We should be switching back to my camera now, and I'm going to move things around here so that we can take a look at these. And Patrick, let's just stay on the main camera for now. This is the pen display that I use, and this is the pen. Now, this display can be set up like a regular monitor, and you can move that camera. You can use it, up on a stand like a regular monitor, but that's not how I use it. In fact, I don't know that anybody uses it that way. The real way that you use these is to tip them down like this, so that it's at desktop level. And so, as I said, there's a pen to interact with it, and there's also this little guy right here. I'll hold that up to the camera. This little remote, and the remote has different buttons on it that you can program specific to the application that you're in for certain functionality. So I'm going to demonstrate this for you. So let me just start to share my screen, and so that you can see what I'm doing here. And Patrick, you can bring me a picture-in-picture if you would, please, sir. And tell me when you have that, Patrick, and I'll continue on. You got me? Okay. All right. So hopefully you guys can see my display now. You can see my screen, and you can also see me working up in the corner there. So this window that we're looking at right now is the configuration software that comes with the tablet. And in here, you can make a lot of settings and change a lot of things. And as I told you, for that remote, we can bring up the settings for that remote, and we can customize buttons and things of that nature. I just got to get to the right place here. Oh, and of course, something's going to go wrong. Of course it is, right? Well, in any event, that's where you go to program in the buttons for the functionality that you want them to have. So we'll move that out of the way. Now, if you can see what's happening here, as I drag the pen, the mouse follows, and I am not touching the screen right now. The mouse is just following where I move the pen as I hover it over the screen. And when I touch on the screen, it's like a mouse click. And so, touching is like a mouse click. There's a little button on the pen right here. And when I press the button, that's like a right click. And so that's basically how it works. So we can do things like, if I want to zoom in, I can zoom in on this area here, and I can zoom out, all of this, through touches. If I bring up something that's linear, let me turn off the screen stretch here to show you that I've programmed in this button here on the remote to be an auto stretch. So I can just press this button on the remote and it'll do an auto stretch for me. So it's a very convenient and handy way to interface with the screen, and all of that's great. As I said, it works well with PixInsight, very well with PixInsight. So for example, if I were to bring up maybe a curve screen here, and I want to maybe play with the contrast curve, well, I can just make changes here, and it's a lot more, in my opinion, it's a lot more easy. It's a lot more convenient than trying to move around and point at these things with the mouse or with the trackpad. Something else that it brings is, if we switch over to an application like Photoshop, and here I am in Photoshop, the pen is pressure sensitive. So right now I have a brush tool here in Photoshop. As I start, I'm going to touch very softly, and you can see I get a very light, small line. And as I press harder, it will get more and more opaque and bigger. So it's just like using a real brush. And I can get some very expressive brush strokes just by using the pressure of the pen. Now, why would you do that? Well, let me give you an example. Let's say I want to let's add a curves layer here, and I will increase the contrast on this curves layer. But I don't want to apply that to the entire image. I just want to apply it to this dust lane. So I'll invert my mask, and now I'll turn on my brush, and I'll make this brush a little bit bigger. And now I can sort of paint in that effect by painting in my mask layer. So I can paint in the effect like this, and just as I paint them in, you'll see that effect come in to the areas that I'm adding it, right? So it's a very convenient way to do that, and something that is impossible to do any other way. You can't really do a pressure sensitive stroke with a mouse. So it's a pretty convenient way to do that. If we look at the mask that I just created, you can see that that would be something that would be pretty hard to create with a mouse. But if we, but is very trivial to create with the pen display. So that's my little commercial on how pen displays work and how they can impact your workflow. Let's look at a pen tablet. I'm going to make you seasick again, but let's move over here. And sitting next to my notebook computer, I have a pen tablet. And let's see if I can get that a little bit better there. How's that? Okay. And I will bring up PixInsight here. And you see I have the same kind of ability. I don't know that you can see the screen there. And let me stop sharing this screen. My bad. I messed that up. A lot of working parts here, folks. I'm sorry. I'm trying real hard to do this right. Okay. So you can now see the pen tablet, and I have the same functionality. I have the pressure sensitive ability to control the functionality on the screen. I have keys here on the tablet. I don't know if you can see that very well, but there are keys here on the tablet that work like the remote does on the pen display. So this is like I said, a couple $100 option that gives you almost the same functionality that you have in the display. It's just that you're not working here on the screen. You're working here on the tablet. This is what's called the Inuos Pro. This is the medium-sized tablet. There's a large one and a small one. So, whatever works for you. So are there any questions on that stuff before we continue on? Eric, did any questions come in?
Give me a moment to unclick. I don't see any yet, Tim.
Nothing yet. Okay, great.
Keep watching.
So we'll keep moving here. Let me get back to my presentation. And, whoops. There we go. And Patrick, you can just bring my presentation screen back and we should be ready to go. We good? Okay. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is what's called a control surface. Now, the one that I use happens to come from a company called Monogram. It's their Monogram Creative Console. And I like this one because it's a modular device. So, and I'll tell you what I mean by that in a second. There are many of these control surfaces. Loop Deck is another one. There's a lot of them out there. But Monogram was created specifically for creatives. And it's for folks that are doing photo editing, video editing, audio editing, those sorts of things. I said a second ago that this is a modular device, and that's because it's made up of these little pieces. And so this dial module has little dials that you can turn or you can click. You can press down and there's a button click. You have this button module that is primarily for keystrokes. You have this slider module that is good for, if you're in Lightroom or something and you want to move an exposure slider or a vibrance slider up and down, you can do that. I forget what the heck they call this thing. They're Omni control device or some silliness like that. But it's got a wheel around the ring that you can turn, and the center is sort of a pressure sensitive pad that you can move around. And as I say, you can, and here's, let me go back up slide here. This is one example of how to lay them out, and you'll see mine is very different than that, but you can just kind of put these together in any way that you want for the, for the layout that you want to have. They do sell kits. So, and with the kit, you get a couple of different modules that all kind of put together in a certain way, and then you can build on it from there. It comes with software that you use to program each of these little devices. So when I press this button on my console, what does it do? How does it react? This software is what you use to teach it to do that. And it also remembers your setup for individual programs. So you can make it behave one way with PixInsight, another way with Photoshop, a different way with Lightroom, a different way with your word processor, whatever you want it to do, it will automatically detect the software that you're using and switch to the appropriate console at that time. So let's take a look at that little bugger, see what that works like. Okay, I'm going to try and move my mouse here, or excuse me, my camera here, so that we can see this thing a little better. There we go. And so this is the console as I've laid it out. I'm going to unplug this and I'll show you that each of these are just little pieces and they magnetically click together. There's little contacts there so that it can talk to each other. So when I put it in there, it's just going to, snap together. You can rearrange them any way that you want. You can add as many of these modules as you want in whatever configuration. This is the only one that you have to have, and that's the main brain. And that's where I plug in right
Tim,
here.
would you mind switching back to your camera view so we can get a better look at that?
Yeah, that'd be a great idea. Let's try that again. Okay. This is my console, as I said, and each of these little gizmos just unplug. There's little contacts on there, and they're magnetic, so you can just click it together in whatever configuration that you want. And this module right here, this one in the corner, is the brain of the whole operation, and that's where your system will plug in. That's the only one that you have to have. The rest of it is all configurable from there. And so there it is. It brings up a little icon up here in the corner. I don't know if you can see, but that's a PixInsight logo there, if that's coming through for you. But anyway, it brings up a little logo for the software that you're using. And that's it. That's the whole device. So I'm going to share my screen here and show some of this to you in action. Patrick, you can give me a little picture-in-picture action there. This is the layout, the configuration tool that I told you about, and this is how I have it configured for PixInsight and the functions that I have there. To program one of these buttons or one of these dials or sliders or whatever, you just click on it. It'll bring up this little window. And I can say, well, I want to customize this, and I want it to be a keystroke, and I want it to be, and we can look up some of the keystrokes for PixInsight. And so if I wanted this to be, I don't know, copy view to a clipboard is Control-C. I can just press my Control-C here on my keyboard, and I can say this is, copy view. And when I say done, it will add that to the display. I can also change the color if I want to change the color on the button. I can make it whatever. I can make it purple. And then the light, I don't know if you can see that, but the light around the button there now has that color. So you can you can say, oh, I know I'm looking for the purple one, and it makes it a little easier to find them. And as I said, you can have different configurations for different applications, and it will just switch to them as you're using them. So as you switch to that application, it'll automatically pull up that console. So let's go into PixInsight. Let me get some of this stuff out of the way here. Let's go into PixInsight. Whoops. And well, that gives me a chance to show you one of the things. So I have my hand on my control wheel, and I can use this to zoom in and out very, very quickly, very efficiently. If I want to get back to the zoomed out version, I can hit this button here, and it goes back to the large view. I can restore down, go back to the large view. All of this is done here, and I'm not interacting with the keyboard at all. So I'm in readout mode right now, but if I wanted to switch to zoom mode, I can click my button and I can zoom in with the pen. and I can switch to pan, and I can use this to pan around. All of this I'm doing just by tapping these keys over here on the control console, right? And if I want to zoom out a little bit or in, I can do that, right there, right? If I want to create a new preview window, I can say I want a preview on this right here, and there's my preview window. And whatever things I change on the preview window, like if I don't know, maybe if I ran noise exterminator on it or something, I can, this, hopefully it'll run quickly on a preview, but I can run that there, and then I can zoom that in, and I can use the undo and redo on the preview. If I can just remember which key it is, it's this one. So there I don't know if this is going to come through very well or not, but I can undo and redo, and in my preview window, right? And I can zoom back up, and we can get rid of my preview. We'll go back to the full view here, and I can do things like, let's say I apply a mask. I can apply a mask to this image, and I can show or hide the mask by pressing this button. So there I can hide it, or show it or hide it. And I can enable or disable the mask by pressing this button. So up here is the enable or disable. See? All of that's being done just by tapping these keys and by programming it. I can configure it to be anything that I want. And with the pen display, I can use it in concert with the remote that I showed you before, the little remote on the pen display. So for example, I can go into, let's go into blink, image inspection, blink. So if I want to blink a bunch of images, I can come in here. I can use my pen to shift click and grab a bunch of images. Well, I'm not going to grab that many because it'll just take too long. But I'll grab a bunch of images there, and then I can use my control surface. Let's finish up here. Okay, there we go. All right. And I can use my control surface to scroll through the images. Oops, this one. I can use the control surface to scroll through the images. Oh, I didn't apply a stretch. Let me apply a quick stretch here. All right, there we go. I can use my control surface to roll through the images one at a time. And if I get to a bad guy like that one, I can just click it to uncheck it. Click the little knob that I have on the control. So I can very quickly roll through these and say, oh, bad guy. I had these out there on purpose so that I could show you what I do when I get a bad guy. But, oh, that's a good guy. We can leave him alone. So you can very quickly scroll through and select the images that you have in Blink. All right, get rid of that. So the rest of this is just, different buttons that I've programmed to do different windows, and I can answer any questions on that. But in a nutshell, that's what the control surface is, and that's how it works, and that's what it does. Does that make sense to everybody? Eric, any questions on this?
No, you're going to give us an idea of what these items cost? Or is that...
I can pull that up here. We can take a look. I don't remember off the top of my head, but we've got plenty of time here. Let me do that. Let me just bring up a tab here. And let's just go to Monogram CC and shop. And their console, their starter kit is $600, and you can add in individual ones. If we go back here under create your own, and so like the button module is $129.
Tim, what's the difference? Well, besides the fact that they look a lot cooler, between this and a function key.
Well, there's not a lot of difference except that you can have so much more of them. And if we look at, so let's look at something here, Alex. Let me answer your question this way. Let's go into Photoshop. No, let's go into Lightroom. Let's go into Lightroom, and I'll just find an image here. Let's just this is good. And I will. I'm just going to create a copy of it so that I don't mess up my copy and we'll go into the develop module. Now, here's something that I can do with the control surface. And let me bring that back up here. Where'd you go? I'm going to just bring this over onto the screen here. So you see these knobs here. I have them programmed for contrast and highlights and shadows and blacks and whites, right? So I can just turn the knobs on my control surface, for example, to turn up the highlights and to drop the shadows. And you see my sliders over here on the side moving, but all I'm doing is using a very intuitive, turn of the knob here to adjust it. And if I wanted to adjust my exposure, I can turn exposure up or down, right? If I want to bring the blacks up, bring the whites down, I can do all of that just by turning knobs. So that's something that a key press isn't going to get you, but you have these other controls that you can use to interact with your screen in a more intuitive way, I think.
So substituting for function keys is only one of its minor abilities.
One
it
of the
also
things
has a whole lot more.
Whole lot more. Correct. And like this multi-function pad here, and I'm not obviously wouldn't use it on an image like this, but I can change the tint and the color temperature, just by touching and using this control surface. Obviously, I went way overboard there, but just as a way to show it to you. So there's a lot that you can do with these things, and there is an entire library of programmed control consoles out there, and you can just go out on their website and find, look up, all these, defined control consoles from other people that are out there and pull what they have. So it's a pretty big community of folks that are using this thing now, and it's getting bigger. This is relatively new. I think this only came out a year or two ago. And the thing that I like about it over something like Loopdeck is that I was able to put together exactly the functions that I want and lay them out exactly how I want them. With something like Loopdeck, it's a fixed device. You have this many buttons, you have this many sliders, you have this many, and not to say that it's not functional, it is, but I think this just gave me a little bit more flexibility.
What is it using to communicate from one module to the next before it gets into that cable and goes off to your computer?
All of the modules have little contacts. And so when the magnets snap them together, the contacts are touching each other. So these guys are all interconnected through those electrical contacts. You can, if I, here, let me stop sharing my screen for a second here. 1 second. Let me stop presenting, and I'll take this apart again and show you here on the side. If you see right here, these little guys sticking out, they contact the other modules on the pads. And so when I, and these little squares are the magnets that hold them together. So when you slide this thing together, these little contacts are going to touch the contacts from the other module, and that's how it's all talking to itself.
Thank you.
Cool. You're supposed to say, wow, that's really neat. I'll give you these cues when they're necessary. Okay.
Okay, just so you won't feel left out, and wow, that's really neat.
There you go. There you go. I knew you guys would come alive.
We're here.
Okay. So let me get back to.
Did we get
So
the,
any other questions on either the pen display or the control surface?
I don't see any questions in the chat right now.
Okay.
did we get the carpal tunnel question?
Not yet.
Yeah, John at Astra on YouTube is wondering if the controls are easier on the wrist for muscle fatigue or for carpal tunnel than using a keyboard.
Well, I think so, because the reason that you get carpal tunnel is that your hands stay in one position, and it's what's called a repetitive stress injury, right? You're never moving except to do this with your hands, and that's why you get carpal tunnel. Here, I'm moving around all over the place, you know, so I think it's a you know, a much easier you know, device on your hands, because you're not constantly making the same motion over and over and over again. And you're using dials and you're touching buttons, and you know, you can have sliders and all kind of different things, right? So I think it would probably be easier on you than using a keyboard. And
Tim, I have a
certainly
question.
the pen display is a lot better for you than using a mouse, in my opinion. I'm sorry, Art, go
Tim,
ahead.
I'm sorry, I have a question. So we have all learned to type where we don't look at the keyboard and the mouse is just in our hand. We don't look at that either. But here you have to learn. You have to be looking up and down, I assume, unless you memorize what keys do what, like you do a typewriter.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's kind of like that. You kind of get used to where you have everything laid out, and I can almost do it without looking at it. Now, if I'm using something that I don't use very often, I glance over and catch a color, but I don't know if it's coming through very well on the screen here. But there's each of these controls has a little illuminated ring around it, and for me, it's extremely obvious. So if I glance over at it, I can hit the red one really easily, right? Or the purple one or the blue one. It's real easy to glance over there and hit the button that you're looking for. So, you know, do you get used to where they are? Yes. Do I look at it every once in a while? Yes, absolutely. Okay. That answer our questions?
Yes.
All right, we're zipping through. This is going to be a quick presentation tonight. All right. Back to my ugly mug. And I will begin sharing this screen. And back to my presentation. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is a colorimeter. Now, what's a colorimeter? A colorimeter is a device that measures color, obvious, right? What we're using a colorimeter for is to measure the output of the display or the printer. And we do that in order to calibrate the colors that we see on our display or the colors that we generate from our printers. You would be surprised, and I was shocked to see how different my display looked after I calibrated it, how different my printed output looked after I calibrated it. It was a night and day difference. And as I say, I'm using, you know, a professional quality monitor here. So it really doesn't have anything to do with quality. It's just a calibration that has to take place. And unfortunately, I don't think a lot of us know about this. And so it's something that I wanted to talk about with you. Now, there are lots and lots of colorimeters out there on the market. If you go out there and Google, you know, colorimeters to calibrate my monitor, you'll find a bunch of them. The one that I use is called i1 Studio, or was called i1 Studio when I bought it from X-Rite. It's now been rebranded as a Color Checker Studio. The same company that Calibrate company is the name of the company, Calibrate. They have another device called the Display Pro HL. I pulled up another one here that I don't have, that Data Color from SpiderX. There are lots and lots of these out there, but they all work basically the same way. Some of them have more functionality than others. Like, for example, the one that I have has the ability to do both my screen and my printer and my scanner if I wanted it to calibrate my scanner, whereas some of the other ones only do your monitor, things like that. So, you know, there are different features and functions that you can get in the different devices. But basically, they all kind of work the same way. And the way that they work, and I'm going to demonstrate it here. We're going to run through it. But the device gets placed on the screen, and the software that comes with the device runs through an array of colors, each time changing the color on the screen and reading the color in the colorimeter, and then moving on to the next color. And it does that through a whole gamut of colors and uses that to create what's called an ICC profile. An ICC profile is a fancy name for the file that has the definition of how your monitor behaves in it. You take that ICC profile and you put it in the configuration for your computer. So on Windows, you go under display settings and your display adapter properties and color management, and you drop the file in there. On Mac, I'll show you where you do it in Mac, but you go to settings under the display and you indicate the color profile in there. Linux, if you're using Linux, both GNOME and KDE have daemons that are capable of loading and operating with an ICC profile. So Linux isn't left out either. Printers work the same way, except that the software prints a printed sheet with all kind of little different colored squares on it. I'm going to show it to you. And you scan the little printed squares and do the same thing. You, on your setup for your printer, you put the ICC profile in there, and then your computer knows how to send data down to your printer. Why does this matter? Well, the reason that it matters is you want the colors that you're seeing to be true. You want to, when your computer tries to produce red, you want your monitor to produce red, and you want it to be the right red, so that when somebody else looks at a photo that you've edited and they have a calibrated monitor, they see the same color that you're seeing. When you send the thing off to a third-party print service and you get a print back, you want the print to match what you saw on the display when you were creating it. So it's very, very important to have calibrated devices. And this is something that I don't know how many of you are using, but I know I've talked to a lot of folks and I've said, do you calibrate your displays? And they say no. And I think it's something that we're missing in the astrophotography industry. I know as a photographer, like portrait photographers, landscape photographers, we're used to using these devices, and I don't hear about it a lot in the astrophotography community. So I thought I'd talk about it and show it to you. So let's do that. This time I'm going to remember to stop sharing and go back to my camera. You're allowed to laugh. That was funny. Okay. And this is the colorimeter that I use. Like I said, this is the i1 Studio device. It's this case that it's in has a weight. That's what this strap is a weight that you use when you hang it off the back of the monitor. I'm going to show you how you do that. And it's just a USB device. It's just a USB cable. And so the way that you hook it up is pretty simple. You plug the USB cable into your USB port, and the device hangs over the back of the monitor like this and onto the screen. Down here in the bottom, I don't know if you can see, there's a little hole. It's black, so it's probably pretty hard to see, but there's a little hole there that it's going to use to look at the screen. So I'm going to share my screen here so that you can see the software working as well. And let me bring up the i1 Studio. There we go. This is the i1 Studio software. And you can see I can calibrate displays, I can calibrate projectors, I can calibrate printers, I can calibrate scanners with this particular device. If I say I want to calibrate my display, it asks me which one. I have two monitors here on my computer. So I have my Cintiq, my pen tablet that we've been looking at, and a Thunderbolt display. So it's asking me which one I want to calibrate. I'm on the pen display right now. Do you use it for photo processing, for video processing, custom? You can change a bunch of settings like white point and brightness, luminance, and all those kinds of things. But it's showing me the gamut of colors that it's going to go through here. And so to begin the calibration process, I say next. The first thing that it wants to do is calibrate the device. Now the device inside has a little light that it uses for calibration. So I simply rotate this device into the calibration mode, and it's telling me that on the screen. If you see that on the screen there, I rotate the device to point at that little light, and I say calibrate. And it's going to go through here for a couple of seconds and calibrate the device so that the device is reading properly. We know that the device is reading properly. And this will only take a second or two. There we go. And now it's telling me to turn it back to the measurement position. So I'm going to go ahead and rotate this back to the measurement position. If I can get a hold of it here. Come on, bugger. There we go. And you notice as soon as I did that, it went to the measurement process on the screen, and I can say start measuring. Now, when I do this, well, it's going to tell me to put the device on the screen, which I already have it on the screen. So I'm just going to say next, and it's going to start cycling through colors. And this is a really boring display for you all to look at, I know, but it's going to sit here and cycle through an array of colors and just keep walking through different luminance levels and different colors in the color palette, each time measuring what the display is actually outputting. Now, while this is doing this, I'll talk a little bit about some other things. This is something that you don't do just once. They recommend that you do it every 30 days. And in fact, they have a little reminder in their software to come up and do it again every 30 days. Because I guess, and I'm not a real expert on the electronics of a display, but I guess the phosphors or whatever that they have in these things tend to degrade over time. So, you know, if you continue to calibrate it, you'll continue to keep your monitor displaying colors correctly, and it won't over time lose its reds or lose its greens at the bright end of the spectrum, things like that. Again, I don't really understand a whole heck of a lot about how the monitor works, but that's what they tell you to do. So that's what we do. Now, I mentioned before about the printer, and I'll show this to you. Hopefully you're seeing my camera. When you calibrate a printer, it prints out a big display like this, and you use the device to just sweep down the row of each of the colors that it has here, and it does the same thing that it's doing on the screen right now. So it just keeps rolling through each of these colors one at a time until it gets to the end of the process. The whole thing takes about 5 minutes. If there's any questions, I'll let it continue to run if you have questions while this is going on. If not, I'll interrupt it.
A couple of questions.
You're
came up.
Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Is there a specific piece of software, PixInsight, Lightroom, etc., that you wouldn't use this hardware for?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there any software where you wouldn't use this hardware? I think they're referring to the little flippable control.
You understand that this doesn't have anything to do with any of the software that you're using. This is all about your display and your monitor.
No, I mean the piece of equipment before. Tim.
Yeah, I think he's referring to the control pad.
Oh, the control panel. There's nothing that you couldn't use it for. I don't usually use it in my word processor because I'm typing, so my hands aren't on the, you know. But there's nothing that you couldn't use it for. There's no reason that you couldn't use it. I think it works best with creative type applications like Photoshop, like PixInsight, like Lightroom, like Premiere Pro, you know, things of that nature. That's where I think they function best.
And there's a comment here from John Kovac. These controls are binding to actions in PixInsight. I can't customize key bindings for any of that as far as I have found. Can I do it without a $600 control panel, I guess?
I'm sorry, Eric, I'm having a problem hearing you. Could you say that again, please? Hello?
These controls are binding to actions in PixInsight.
They're emulating keystrokes.
I can't customize key bindings for any of that as far as I have found. Can I do it without a $600 control panel?
I think he's asking.
I'm not sure what the question is.
There are hotkeys in PixInsight that I am making use of. So if you go out on PixInsight's website, and in fact, I can pull it up here for you and find it, I'm sure. But there are hotkeys in PixInsight that do certain things, and that's all this is doing is sending those hotkey strips. They're fixed. Yeah, they're fixed. There's a set of those, and I don't know if I still have it up here or not, but I can bring it up in a second as soon as this finishes. But there is a set of of hotkeys in PixInsight, and they're published out there on their website. And that's what I'm making use of with the control surface.
Tim, do you know if it's also possible to make up additional hotkeys in PixInsight besides the ones they offer?
I think it is not possible.
Yeah, and I think that's what Josh is asking. Is there any way you could do that without the device that you were telling us about?
I don't believe there is, no. I can't do it with the device that I'm using. The device that I'm using just is sending keystrokes. It's just a more convenient way of doing so. It's a more convenient, easier to use user interface device. That's all it is. It's not adding any functionality to PixInsight. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, so this has now completed. It's now done with this process. And if I walk through here, it'll ask if I want to save this profile. And yes, I can go ahead and save the profile. And it says, okay, yeah. And here it can show you a before and after. Now, we're not going to see any difference on my monitor because I run mine all the time. And, I always make sure that it's calibrated. So the before and after here is not very compelling, but you can see certainly the first time that you do this, if you do a before and after, you will see differences in this image that comes up, when you do this on your monitor. So that's it. That's how the colorimeter works. And then once it creates the file, as it has done here, then I'll show you how this works on a Mac. You go to your displays, and right here's a place where it says color profile, and this is where it put in that file. It did it for me. I can put it in there. I can also go back and select other old ones that I have out there, but it went and put that color profile here in the setup. So now I'm certain that this red that I'm looking at here on the screen is going to be reproduced faithfully on printers that I might use, on third-party printing services that I might use, on someone else's screen if they're using a color calibrated display. So the red that I'm looking at is the real red. I'm certain that what I see is what I'm going to get. Is that making sense, everybody?
You also have to send that to the printer if you're using some other printer, or you have to define it in your printer so that it will know how to interpret it. Is that correct?
No, the printers have to be calibrated as well, but the printer doesn't know anything about your monitor, and the monitor doesn't know anything about the printer.
The profile's included in the file that you send.
The profile is part of your computer setup. It's not included in the file that you send. No.
It's not included in the file you send?
No. The color in the file is the color in the file. What you want to do is make sure that your monitor faithfully reproduces that color.
Okay, how do I make sure that my printer that I'm sending this off to some printing house to get done uses the same profile that it needs?
It doesn't have to be the same. No. Okay, so we're getting confused here. Let's back up for a second. In the file, you say, I want this pixel to be this color red, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want your monitor, by calibrating it, you're making sure that your monitor is properly displaying that color red. When you send it to a print shop, they also have calibrated printers. So they're going to take that color red pixel out of your file and produce it on their printer, which is also calibrated to produce that same color red. So as long as everybody is calibrated, their red is going to match your screen's red. And that's why you calibrate your monitor.
Okay,
thank
you.
Is that clear as mud?
I don't have to do it. I don't have to do anything as long as they're doing something right. All I did was make sure I'm doing it right.
That's exactly correct. Now you got it.
There's a question here. Can calibration be done on any monitor, or do you need to have a high quality monitor to do it?
Most monitors that you buy today, in fact, I haven't yet run across one that cannot be calibrated. They can all be calibrated from everything that I've ever seen. And I have professional ones and I have cheap little ones that I use on, for other things. They can all be calibrated. everything that I've run across.
So in this world, when, well, I don't want to say 95% or a very high percentage of images are viewed in backlit screens,
Mhm.
should we worry about this as much? I mean, I used to print a bunch of things. I don't anymore because everything's on a screen.
Well, that's going to be something that we're going to talk about next. But yes, I think you should, because you want to make sure that when you're processing an image and your eyes are picking up what's being displayed on your screen, you want to make sure that your screen is showing you the right color. Otherwise, it could be way off. And somebody else could look at it and say, what the hell, Eric must be getting old here, going blind here, because these colors are garbage, right?
Well,
You need to
Eric
make
is
sure that
getting
you're-
old, but I'm not blind yet. So I think we're all
You-
set. But if you send
You're-
out an image like posted on AstroBin, it does include the color profile.
No, it includes something different. What you're seeing in there is not the same thing that we're talking about here. We're talking about calibrating your display so that it faithfully reproduces what's in the file. That's you're getting lost in profiles here, which I know this is confusing, but what we're talking about doing is making sure that our display is faithfully reproducing colors.
For the
That's
purpose
what this
of
does.
printing, not necessarily for the purpose of displaying on
No,
another
absolutely for the
monitor.
purpose of display.
On
Absolutely.
another
for-
monitor?
Okay. How am I not explaining this correctly?
You're right. I'm confused a little bit.
Yeah. So let's say let's take a hypothetical. Let's say that your monitor was so bad that when you tried to display red, it displayed pink. You, not knowing any better, can only see pink and would change the hue on your screen to make it look more red. When someone else looks at it with their calibrated monitor, the color's not going to look correct to them. It's not going to be the same thing that you were looking at because your monitor was out of calibration. Does that make better sense?
Which is why I look at 3 different monitors before I.
Think about it this way, Eric. You got to tune a guitar, right?
Well, I never tune my guitar.
Oh, Jesus.
I'm sorry. Yes, I understand. I understand.
You have to tune a guitar. If you don't
Yes.
tune a guitar, when you pluck the E string, you might be plucking an E string, but it's not going to be an E, right? If you play with other musicians, you're going to be out of tune because your E is not going to match their E. This
It's
is
been
the
a long
same
time
thing.
I played
We're-
with other musicians, Tim.
We're tuning up our monitor here so that it produces color the same way that someone else that is properly in tune produces color.
I think the key thing
Is that a
is
good analogy?
what percent of the people actually calibrate their monitor? And that's probably an interesting question. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you that when I talk to other photographers, other portrait photographers, other landscape photographers, they all calibrate their monitors, all of them. When I talk to the printing houses, MPix, Printique, what's that other one? It starts with an A. I can't remember now. Anyway, they all calibrate their printers. They have to. I don't know in this community, and maybe we can do a quick straw poll here of of the folks in this in our audience there. Are you calibrating your monitors or not? I don't know how many are, but I know that I've talked to other astrophotographers that are not aware of this, which is why I
By the way,
wanted to talk.
I calibrate my big monitor per your recommendation with the piece of hardware that you recommended.
I'm sorry, say again?
I calibrate my monitor, my big monitor, with the hardware you recommended.
You do.
And I've done that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Ryan says, I calibrate my monitor with Spider X system. Okay, I guess that's it.
Spider X is another calorimeter. Great.
So what are embedded color profiles for then? That's a question I think you've kind of answered.
Well, the embedded color profile talks about what colors are in the file. That's a color profile in the file, right? But your monitor still has to faithfully reproduce what color is in the file. Those are kind of 2 different animals.
Yeah, so
You're
when you
talking
save
about this.
when you save a JPEG to post, it asks you the question in Photoshop whether you want to include the color profile.
Right. But that doesn't have anything to do with your monitor. That has to do with the colors that are being assigned inside of your inside of your file.
And how does that translate to the display of that JPEG image?
How does that translate to the display of that? Okay, so as the computer tries to display your file, it knows what the colors are by reading what's in the file, and your color calibration of your monitor is used to faithfully reproduce that on the screen.
And it is unfortunate that they use the term profile in a number of different ways.
Yeah.
But, you know, when we think about saving the profile into the file, like the JPEG, let's say, you know, that's really referring more to the color space, sRGB, Adobe RGB,
The color
that
space.
type of thing. And so if you've worked up an image, let's say in Adobe RGB, and someone opens it up in
sRGB.
sRGB, it'll look different. The colors will look different because the software has to, you know, make some type of translation. So
That's correct. You're correct, Patrick.
and so at least the point of putting that profile in the JPEG is to try to tell the other software, whoever opens it, use this color space when you open
Use this
file.
color space, use this color scheme. Correct. That's correct.
That makes much more sense.
Okay. Questions on colorimeters or any more on this topic here? No. Good. All right, moving on. And if more stuff comes up, if more questions come up, please just put them in the chat. That's fine. I don't have much more to talk about here, so we can come back to them. Let's move this over here. And I'm going to go back to my presentation. All right. And so the last thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit was printers. And so contrary to what my friend Eric just said a few minutes ago, I'm going to get up on my soapbox here and say that all photographers should print their work. And the reason that I say that is because I believe that printing your photos can make you a better photographer. And the reason that I say that is that prints have a way of emphasizing what's going on in the photo, especially large prints. They can really emphasize compositional issues. That they emphasize distractions, processing issues that you might have had. Make flaws more obvious. I can't tell you the number of times that I haven't looked at something on the screen and thought it looked good, printed it, and said, "Huh, this is terrible. I got to go back and fix this. I've got to go back and do something else here." I think looking at a color print, especially a good color print, is an important step in the production of your images. And like I say, I think taking the time to make prints will make you a better photographer. Ansel Adams is quoted as saying that the negative, kind of equivalent to our screen, the negative is equivalent to the composer's score, but the print is the performance. And when you get right down to it, that's true for us as well. The print that we're creating in the end is the performance. That's the final thing that we are trying to create here. And so the printers that I use for printing at home, I use the Image Prograph Pro from Canon. The Pro 1000 is the one that I use, but they have different models, of course, for these. But these are printers that are designed for creating high quality photographic prints. That's what they're for. I don't print documents on this thing. It's way too expensive for that. This is for producing prints. It has 11 different ink cartridges that look like this. This is one of them, but there's 11 of these in the printer. And obviously with 11 different ink cartridges, it's capable of producing a much wider color gamut than an inkjet printer with 3 different colors of ink cartridges in there. So it faithfully reproduces colors, and it also has a mechanism where it maintains a very specific distance between the print head and the media that you're printing on. So you get a very, very smooth application of ink. I mean, the prints that come out of these things are just gorgeous. They print on a wide variety of papers, everything from what they call their luster paper, which is a high gloss, very shiny, very sparkly kind of paper, all the way down to a heavy fine art matte kind of finished paper. So I think there's like 10 or 12 different types of media, types of paper that you can print on with these things. The Pro 1000 that I have can do from a 4x6 print up to a 17x22 print. The ImageProGraph 300 does from a 3.5x5 up to a 13x19. It also has the ability to put a roll on it and do very, very wide panos. So like if you're doing one of these big like Milky Way, panographic shots or something like that, you can do those on the Pro 300 as well. There is a 4000, but I think you're going to need a bigger house. I've seen that printer and it's a monster. I don't think that's anything that anybody would put in their office at home. But there is a 4000 available that does very, very large sheets. You can check these printers out at usa.canon.com. They're not inexpensive. I won't kid you. They're not inexpensive, and the inks are not inexpensive. The cartridges are very expensive. So if that solution isn't for you, then something else that you might want to think about trying are some of these third-party printing services that are out there. There are many. I certainly am not qualified to review them all. I personally have used MPix with great success. I think they produce terrific output. They're really great for printing small quantities. They're good for large quantities too, but that can get pricey, of course. They can print sizes that are inconvenient for us to produce at home. Like if you wanted to produce a big poster or something like that, it's something that they can do and do very well. They can print on media that we simply can't produce it at home or would be very difficult for us to produce at home, like doing metal prints, doing G-clay prints, canvas, wood, acrylics. They do photo books, they do calendars, all those kinds of things. So if you're not in a position to produce output at home, this is a great way to get some printed output and take these images that we spend so much time producing and do something with them other than putting them on Astrobin. Put them up on a wall. Decorate your house with them. It's a great conversation piece. When my friends come over and sit in my bar, which is where I put mine up, they say, "Okay, what new pictures do you have on the wall today?" So I think it really adds to my enjoyment of the hobby, printing my images and putting them up on the wall. And that's about all I have. So, do we have any more questions? Anything else come up?
I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
I don't see anything more, Tim.
I'm sorry, say again.
I don't see anything more.
Don't say any more. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody in here have any
Well,
questions?
thank you.
I like Joe Foster's comment there. He just says that if true red is a value of 255, then calibrated devices will make them look the same color of red, that is 255. The cal for your monitor just makes sure that a value of 255 shows red to your eye. So I think he kind of summed it up pretty good.
Obviously, I couldn't say it better myself because I didn't say it
Yeah.
that well.
Yay for Joe!
Terrific.
All righty.
Well, thank you all. I hope that helped. I hope that added something, and I hope I built up your Christmas wish list.
Yeah, now I can add some more stuff to it. My parents will be thrilled. Yeah, that's great. It's fun to hear about some different devices than the usual once in a while, and see what kinds of things you can do to make your image processing better. And
Tim, we always need more toys.
yes,
Amen. He who dies with the most toys wins.
I was just gonna say that.
Well, I've heard that before. Who says that?
I don't know.
I don't know. I've seen several iterations of it with like
I say that all the
scrapbooking and
time.
quilting and stuff
Right.
like that.
And it's true.
And before we sign off, I just want to do what Eric usually does and remind you, Tim, that you're welcome to stick around afterwards while
Oh,
we
yeah,
discuss.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Or take off, eh?
Yeah, we usually kick them out, but tonight we'll let them stay. He's been good. Alrighty.
We're saying
Well,
good night.
yeah, I think that's about it. So have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming, and see you next week.
Oh,
Thank you all. Good night.
Don't miss next week. We all got to get prepared for the eclipse.
Yeah, gotta get prepared for the eclipse.
Got to get prepared for the eclipse.
And we're out.